I'll talk to her more. Lauren Wright from Princeton University.
Chris is normally with you more than I am.
Feel bad. Well, no, he's too cheap to pay for a ticket on the Long Island Railroad. He lives on the Long Island, but he won't for that. So the other way around, we're too cheap to pay for one for him, maybe.
Yeah, well, if I'm coming to you, you better be paying, Kyle.
Exactly. I knew you were going to say that. I knew I set myself up for that. Let me ask you, Lauren, first. This is the way I talked about this last hour a little bit. The way I'm thinking about this. I'm trying to, because we dig in on education, right? The way I've been thinking about it is he got all these conservatives since 1979 have wanted to get rid of this department.
Yep.
And they say we want to go back to the states. But then we look at all the numbers, and more than almost any other country, we already do that. We're very decentralized in this country. It's like 90-10 on average, some states more. So how is it, this argument, do you get it in terms of how it's actually going to make things better when we're already doing a lot of it? That's how I feel, at least.
I don't know, because the most popular elements of the department are funneling funds to the states, which the press secretary just said is still going to happen. But
right, they're not even getting rid of that.
It's an unpopular government department. It's the third most unpopular department of all of the government agencies.
Wait, what are the other? Obviously now I want to know what the
DOJ is less popular,
okay.
And
I mean,
now I have to think of the other one.
Yeah, I'm going to say, like, they're all, the government now is relatively unpopular. That's interesting. Anyway, I
even the Social Security Agency, just as a point of comparison, which you've been talking about all day, is 53% approval. And so,
gotta be the IRS.
Gotta
be the IRS.
I just thought of it.
Nobody likes the IRS.
Exactly.
But anyway, so it's
but even something like the Social Security Agency, which its function is to support people and cut them checks, only has 53% approval.
Now, the thing, Chris, what's your take on that, A? And then B, one of the things I think is interesting is if you look at the places in, I think we have a map that we could show, states that rely more on the federal funding. What do you see is in common with many of these states, like Montana, South Dakota, Alaska, Arkansas, on and on, Mississippi, Kentucky, red states? So they rely more, like I said, more. It's probably like 90-10 on average, but you see they're up in the 20s. So what do you make of all of this?
I think that every Republican has wanted to get rid of the Department of Education.
Yep.
None of them actually understands what it does exactly. And now we're going to find out. And when people stop getting student loans, when states stop getting the funding they need for a program that's supporting them, they are going to complain, and there will be backlash about it. And as for the poll on Social Security, yes, 53%. Those are the percentage of Americans that are actually on Social Security. The rest of us who are paying into it don't like it. But once we're getting it, we're going to love it. So it's just that kind of thing. And that's what's going to happen here with the Department of Education. All of these people are complaining about it costs too much. And then when the services go away, that's when the backlash will begin. And we'll start to feel it sometime around the midterms. So good luck, Republicans.
Well, it's kind of interesting because they don't necessarily go away. The student loans, they say, are going to stay in the department. But even theoretically, if they ever got Congress to eliminate the department, we didn't have it before 1979. But I looked it up. I think Title I schools came in as part of the civil rights movement in the 60s. And they still existed. It was just not through a federal Department of Education. But that's the concern.
It was combined with health care.
Right. It was health, education, and welfare is what it was called back then. Yeah. So, but that's a concern, though, Lord. To Chris's point, on a practical perspective, the things you say you want to control or return control to the states. I said they already have a lot of control. But the argument on the flip side is those things like that affect civil rights, low-income students, that the opponents of what the president's doing say, well, if you give it to the states, they might not make very good calls on this.
That's a really good point. And so is the point that Trump might need some of the infrastructure within the Department of Education to check what he sees as woke schools doing all these things at the state and local level, and could use the Civil Rights Division, for instance, to do that. I don't know if that's going away completely, but it could just be a function of the DOJ, for instance, now.
Yeah, we don't know exactly.
That's why
really know.
Most Republican presidents don't dismantle these agencies. They get into office and they take a look and they say, I'd rather bend it to my will. I'd rather staff it. I'd rather layer it. They make all kinds of changes, but they don't get rid of it.
Speaking of agencies nobody wants to touch, Social Security brought up already about it's unpopular, but the idea in politics, third rail or whatever you want to call it, that people don't touch it. Elon Musk, Chris, had come out, and I talked about this last hour, calling it a Ponzi scheme, and now we have this federal judge saying to Doge and Elon to stay away. They blocked them from the Social Security personal data for a time. So thoughts on that and just kind of the pushback that Elon's getting these days?
Yeah, I think he's getting a lot of pushback, particularly from Tesla shareholders, and they're probably most annoyed of anybody at him, I would imagine. And I think you're going to continue to see that. Like yesterday, they decided that senior citizens can't call Social Security anymore to make changes to how they're receiving benefits. They got to go online or they've got to get to an office. Now, if you live in a rural community and you got to drive 4 hours to an office, or if you're a senior citizen who's not computer literate, that's not going to work out well for you. And that is why you're seeing people show up at town halls yelling at their congressman because they are annoyed at what's going on here. Yes, everybody wants to fight waste, fraud, and abuse, but there's no plan. I would argue right now that my friend Lauren here, in the 5 minutes that she spent studying the Department of Education before she came on here, did more work to understand it than anybody in the Trump administration.
You are really.
And they probably should call her for her breakdown of what
really
they actually do.
Why would you insult Lauren, who's unlike you, is a scholar and a lecturer at an Ivy League?
Believe me, she did more work than I did prepping for this interview.
More than 5 minutes in. Well, I don't need to defend you. You can let him have it on that. But go ahead.
I'm happy to let Chris say whatever he wants to say. He's my friend. Yeah.
Do you want to talk about Elon and education a little bit, or talk about Tesla with the stock price, which I think there's an interesting conversation to be had there to some extent. But again, he's getting blocked on some of this stuff, and he just got blocked again.
And the politically unsavvy part of just calling Social Security a Ponzi scheme is, again, because people like it when they benefit from it.
Right.
But it is true that there's waste. It is true that there's some fraud. It is true that they cut checks to the tunes of billions annually that are mistakes. And so why isn't the argument just being shaped in favor of, hey, this stuff is wasteful, it's keeping seniors that are deserving of these benefits from getting them more efficiently. And that's the point Murkowski's making, for instance.
Yeah, we put a quote up from Senator Murkowski last hour. All right, Lauren, thank you. And Chris, 11 past the hour, I want to get to the East Room at the White House because that's where that